Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Hoover, the CEO of PARC, and I'm going to stand out of the bright light there. And I'm really pleased to welcome you all to the PARC Forum. For those of you who are, this is your first time at PARC, it's an invited speaker series that's free and open to the public. And part of what innovation is about is unexpected opportunities, unexpected interactions, and that's why we do this and bring a variety of speakers in and welcome anyone in the community to join in with us. So thank you for coming. And today is the first talk in, we're having a special Power of 10 series. And that is part of our year-long celebration of 10 years of practicing open innovation at PARC. 10 years ago, we were created as an independent subsidiary of Xerox to focus on open innovation. And it's been an interesting and a successful 10 years. And so we're going to have 10 speakers on 10 different aspects of innovation, which hopefully you will find interesting. And a couple upcoming talks, just to draw your attention. We've got Hal Varian in 3 weeks and Clayton Christensen on March 28th. And we'll have other PARC Forum talks over the year in a variety of areas. I'm really pleased to introduce today's speaker, Geoffrey Moore. Jeff's name is synonymous with innovation, and he's made it his life's work to understand and exploit disruptive technologies. And he has well known as the author of Crossing the Chasm, and more recently Escape Velocity. We're really pleased to have him today tell us a little bit about his insights into disruptive innovation. So, Jeff, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Great, thank you. Great, okay. Great. So, this is work that came out in a new book, and I want to kind of share with you some of the insights that came out of this. This is kind of been in a series. About every 4 or 5 years, things change enough in tech that the last book doesn't work. And so you sort of say, okay, well, let's try another one. And so this is actually five successive failures, and this is the current one we're working on. No, but the issue is what happens is stuff changes a lot in this valley, as you guys know. And so when you look at this, you say, well, you might say, Jeff, maybe you should just stop. But if you look at these things, what was happening with the early books, particularly Crossing the Chasm Inside the Tornado, that was a time when tech was an outsider. Basically, the technology sector was breaking into the marketplace, and the disruptive innovation was about just how could we actually get into the mainstream markets with our next generation technologies, and it was all about the technology adoption life cycle and chasms and tornadoes and stuff like that. This last decade, that's not what's going on. In this last decade, tech has become the mainstream. Arguably, it's the most vibrant sector on the planet right now. The most valuable company in the stock market right now is a tech company. That was not the case when we started on this journey. And therefore, the established enterprise, who was historically kind of the dumb, slow-moving dinosaur thing, it has become us, right? So it's like, okay, well, so how do we now evolve, right, with the new world? And the challenge has become breaking out of developed markets. Clay's going to talk to you, I don't know what Clay's going to talk to you about this time around, but Clay taught us all about the innovator's dilemma, in the 90s, and that challenge of once you build inertial momentum around a successful franchise, the world doesn't want you to get off of that railroad track. And when the railroad track starts going west and the land is going south, you need to actually get on the new track, and it's very, very difficult to do. And so that led us to this notion about, and we've all talked a lot about the inertial resistance in corporations and why is that so hard to do, and big companies can't innovate and blah blah blah. And the more I thought about that, we have to solve for this problem. As a developed economy, we have a lot at stake in our major enterprises, and we used to be able to just plow them under, right? You say, okay, well, we'll just, Sperry or Univac or Burroughs or, Control Data or NCR. I mean, these are all companies that got, well, NCR's got a second life in another way, but we'd plow them under, but we'd build the next one. We'd build DEC, and we'd build Wang, and we'd build Prime, and we'd build Four-Phase, and we'd plow them under, and we do it again and again and again, right? Well, the problem is that always works fine if your home market is the global center of all growth markets, which was the U.S. market in the 20th century. Not in the 21st century, right? The great growth markets are on the other side of the Pacific. So we can plow them under here, but they're going to get sprouted up over there. So we have a bigger stake in this game maybe than we've ever had before, and that's what the escape velocity thing was focused on, saying, let's time out, let's solve for this problem, not just mock it, right? So in looking at this, you say, okay, so why is it so hard? And the first one is you really should start with clay, right? Because the world wants successful franchises to stay and roll. Their customers want them to stay and roll, their suppliers, their employees, everybody wants them to stay and roll. And the risk-adjusted return of doing a new franchise never looks as good as the immediate return on the current franchise. And even though that's trapping, even though eventually we can see a Kodak in our future, the world every year says, yeah, but one more year, which is how Kodak got to where it was. And Xerox came closer to that edge than it ever wanted to, okay? So the innovator's dilemma is very real, and it puts pressure on your board, it puts pressure on who puts pressure on the CEO, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing is something we call the asymmetry of risk. It's a very simple idea. The more you have to lose, and the less you have to gain, sort of period. And as a result, what starts happening is in an asymmetry of risk situation, you take less risk. I mean, Darwin selects for intelligence, right? I mean, why wouldn't you take less risk? And by the way, the asymmetry works the other way, of course. So if you're a have, you have this worry about loss. If you're a venture-backed startup, whoopee! Let's take risk. The only people that can lose are VCs, and who cares, right? So let's just do it, right? It's all about doing that. But in a large established enterprise, risk is asymmetrical, and it makes it much harder to take risk. The third thing, and this is kind of a killer, in a large enterprise, how do you run a large enterprise? Well, you run it with annual planning processes, and you have operating plans and whatnot. And the enterprise is too large to say, let's zero-based budget this thing. Let's just start from scratch. It's like you go crazy. So basically what you do instead is somebody about the third quarter, CFO pulls out the current year's operating plan, circles all the number in the fourth quarter, ships them out, says multiply them by 4, that's your first shot at kind of next year, come back to me with what you need, how you're going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And so what that does is that immediately enfranchises all the legacy businesses, and it puts them under pressure to come up with a number next year that's larger than their resource base. So then they start thinking about how to get more resources, and that is not received with very friendly terms. So then they start figuring out, how do I squeeze more performance out of my existing resources? And by the time you get to the notion of a new franchise and bringing on a new franchise, man, you've used up most of your resources, all of your talent, and all of your energy. And so it's very, very hard at the margin at that point to onboard a new franchise, because all the good stuff has already been taken off the table. So big problem with our planning processes. And then the fourth thing is our financial markets aren't helping us either. Because in the current financial markets, frankly, no investor has an interest in any institution after 3 years at all. Why would they? I mean, I can buy and sell and buy and sell. I have no interest in your long-term thing. Now, employees do. Communities do, governments do, customers do. Everybody else on the planet except an investor does. But we've overprivileged the investor's power position in our companies, so that now the board feels held, well, just really bound and determined to say, look, my first job is to support shareholder value. Well, shareholder value is diverging from stakeholder value. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. And we have to correct for it. But in the short term, you know, that's like, okay, we have to solve world hunger as well. And I know that Xerox PARC is very imaginative, but it might take a while. So the issue is you've got to kind of live with these four things. We're not going to change any of them in the short to medium term. So the question now is, given those pressures, how can we play a game where the problem is, and the problem statement is very simple. Can we onboard a next generation franchise into our existing franchise company? Can we build another, if I'm a 20 or a 30 or a $40 billion franchise, can I build another $10 billion franchise? If I'm a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or $4 billion franchise, can I add a second business to my world? I'm NetApp. I'm going from $4 to $5 billion. I'm a storage company. Is there anything more? Right. So that's the kind of problem we're trying to solve for. Because eventually people could go, you know what? We got this storage thing. I mean, we think we got it. And so at that point, it's like, well, what's next? So it's never that the world runs out of problems. There's always something to do next. So the issue is, how do we get our institution to participate in that next generation of opportunity and not get trapped in its current structures? So you say, okay, what would it take? And I think it kind of nets out to three things. So if you're beeper goes off. This is probably the last slide. You can leave, you'll be fine. Don't have to read the book, you'll be fine. Okay, so what does it take? Well, the first issue is this notion that it takes an understanding of the interaction between power and performance. So one of the things you see when you deal with even small companies, but certainly the larger they get, we manage companies through performance metrics. We have performance cultures. The investors are looking at performance outcomes. And that's a very good thing. But there's performance, the way you create performance is you take a strategic position of power and you capitalize on it, which means at any given point you're harvesting some amount of your power in order to create performance. And that power is renewable to some degree, but over time it decays. And if you don't renew your power, it's a little bit like, think about potential energy and kinetic energy. I mean, we've got to pump something uphill if it's going to run downhill. And if all you do is measure downhill, eventually you're going to run out of stuff to harvest. And that's what happens. That's when companies get stuck, and that's when they get lost. And that's where Kodak is, where RIM's struggling with that, Yahoo's struggling with that right now, HP's struggling with that right now. Really, really good companies, not bad companies. So this issue of, and the problem is the system is so geared to performance. And we talk about power or investing for the future or strategic actions, but we have nowhere near as articulate or as explicit a system for dealing with it. And so part of the intent of the book, in fact, I would argue the primary intent of the book is how can we make that system more visible and more actionable than it is today. We have to get a better balance between power and performance. And when I said put power before performance, it just simply is, by the way, it also implies in time. So if you're going to do your annual planning and start in the third quarter and circulate that thing, you got to do your power planning the quarter before that. And you have to figure out what strategic investments you're going to make the quarter before that and do your best to ring fence those investments before you start the ritual fire dance called annual budget planning, right? So power before performance. The second notion then is, well, that puts a premium on leadership in relation to management. So management is the discipline of creating performance, and leadership is the discipline for creating power. And they're different. And we sometimes, it's very interesting, in our culture we tend to romanticize leadership and to kind of be condescending to management. Totally inappropriate. This is a yin and a yang, right? But the problem is, the larger the company gets, the bigger the scope of the management challenges, the percentage of managers to leaders gets higher and higher and higher and higher in favor of management. And then at some point, it becomes almost impossible for the leadership momentum to get enough mass and enough energy behind it to actually carry the day. And so leadership gets drowned in management. And so we've got to figure out a way to get the leadership piece back in. Again, I'm a big advocate of the quarter before you start the annual management migration, start the leadership. We don't do that with normal annual planning process. Normally what people do is they kick off their annual planning with a strategic offsite. That's the last strategic moment for the rest of the year. Okay? and so it doesn't work, right? You've got to be able to get the leadership thing, get enough of the next year's resource allocation done before you start the management hike, or it's going to get lost. It's going to get lost in the fray. And then the third thing is this notion of metrics. And we'll talk a little bit about metrics in just a minute, but there's a higher order issue here. You run large corporations on performance metrics. They're great for anything that is in a state of being deployed or optimized. They're not very good for things that are being invented or incubated, or even just before they've reached the tipping point. So the tipping point is whenever you start a strategic initiative, the world is in resistance to that initiative. Not because it's malicious, but because you're getting out of your rut. And the world's saying, no, get back in your rut. So the strategic initiative is always in resistance. And furthermore, if you start getting traction, the resistance increases. Now, there comes a time in this process, if you are persistent enough and you're able to get enough support, that you reach a tipping point. And the world goes from being in resistance, and it capitulates, and it goes into assistance. And in fact, it actually now embraces the new franchise. And now you really can use all the performance metrics. And in fact, you'll look fabulous by the performance metrics, but they're irrelevant prior to the tipping point. In fact, it's worse. They're not irrelevant. They are destructive prior to the tipping point. Because basically you're trying to say, how much bread can I get out of my seed corn? Right? You want to grow the corn and harvest and then make the bread, right? And these are all bread metrics, and we're using them at the wrong time. And this is how we destroy companies that are in their adolescence. And I'll show you that in a slide in a minute. So those are the three uber themes. But they're all around this notion of power. And so then we said, well, power. We don't use the word power very much in our culture. And when we do, it's not clear that we're being nice. Right? It's not clear that power's got a positive valence to it. Now, for me, it does, but for a lot of folks, it's like, no, power, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, that kind of power, right? So, but in the sense of power and performance, potential energy, kinetic energy, okay, I get it. Yeah, okay, right, okay. Put fuel in the gas tank, drive the car. I got it. Okay. But then, so let's have a better conversation about power. Well, so John Metcalf's back here. He and I have been consulting on strategy for, well, as long as you might imagine. And the issue, inevitably, these conversations on strategy, they often degenerate into almost like food fights. People are, they're either yelling at each other or they're just being passively aggressive and snarky, and they're talking past each other, and and whatever, and they're rolling their eyes and all this stuff. And we're thinking, why? What's going on? And what we began to realize over time is there's more than one type of power. And what we were doing was we were talking past each other because we weren't isolating a common topic. We thought we were on a common topic, but we weren't. The long-term guys were being snarky with the short-term guys, and the sales guys were being snarky with the engineers. So we said, look, how would you have a better conversation around power? And we said you have to have a taxonomy of power. And so the taxonomy we came up with said, look, there are 5 types of power that are going to matter in this dialogue. There are not 6. That's the first rule of a model, right? If there are 5, there are not 6, right? Now, it could be wrong, and if you find a 6, tell me, and we'll change the model. But for right now, it's 5. And they're organized in order of impact, meaning the category you're in is the biggest impact power there is. But it's also the one that's hardest to change. And as you go down the hierarchy, you get things that have more and more local impact, but they're also easier to control and easier to manipulate. And the important thing as you go through this thing is different kinds of power matter at different points in the history of a category. So at the beginning of a category, when it's super unstable, it's hugely important to have dialogues around what is happening in the category, which companies are going to get affected, and which markets are going to be the first markets to move to the new paradigm. And in this model, by the way, categories are defined by groups of competitors. Markets are defined by groups of customers. We use the word market in lots of other ways in our culture, but we're very specific in our word. When you say market, you mean a group of customers, and categories for a group of competitors. So in an unstable marketplace, you care a lot about the top, not so much about the bottom, because frankly, a lot of the offers and execution in the market are going to be irrelevant in 5 years potentially. So let's look at what's going on there. As the category starts to get momentum, the category stabilizes, but the pecking order and the power has not yet stabilized. So now you care a lot about company power, market power, and offer power in terms of who's playing what games where and who's going to get to the head of the pack. Because once a market stabilizes around a pecking order, it tends to stay in place. Coca-Cola is still the leading soft drink, right? Because once it happens, it sort of stays there. So it's incredibly important as markets are forming their pecking order to be very articulate about this. You're not worried about the category, and we're not yet at trying to optimize for execution. We're just trying to make sure we do the right things. It's all about effectiveness. We don't care about efficiency yet. But then, when the category does stabilize, and your company's role has settled in, and you're either number 1 or number 2 or number 10, doesn't matter. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, the category and company dialogues, you don't need to have those every year at the strategic offsite. We need to talk a lot about, is there a new market segment we can go after? How can we modify our offer? And by the way, how can we optimize our execution given our role, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the framework. And the book, the Escape Velocity book has 5 chapters organized around the 5 powers in the hierarchy of power. And what I want to do just briefly is I'm going to introduce you a couple of frameworks under each of the 5 things, and then we're going to break for Q&A. But let me just kind of show you how this works. So the idea behind category power, well, how would you know if you had category power? Category power is where you get business. Business comes to your company because the world is buying a whole lot of whatever it is you do. I mean, a whole lot. It's a secular growth phenomenon, meaning this is a one-time only. The world is shifting from, analog feature phones to smartphones. It's shifting from laptops to tablets. It's shifting from, laser to inkjet or, dot matrix to laser or whatever the heck is going on, right? So in that world, there was this model, and this is the model that was at the beginning of the model. This is the stuff we were working with crossing the chasm and inside the tornado, and that's the emerging market stuff. But the real payoff in this model is actually the B time. That's when things really grow. And if you're in a B market, you can have the 7th or 8th or 9th worst company, best company in the market. You're still going to do fine, right? This is when you like to say in your resume, I was at Oracle. I took them from 80 million to 800 million. Yeah, you were there. You were present. You were present. Yes. You were there. Yeah, that's true. Right. Good work. Okay. Now, if you want to really test yourself as a manager or a leader, how did you do in this market, right? Because the mature market says, okay, the secular market says it's kind of a one-time, we're buying into the new paradigm. After that, the category can last for decades. I mean, we're the automobile category, combustion engines, 8, 9 decades, right? But it's a cyclical growth market now. And now what we're playing is the category power has now flattened out. It's not hurting you, but it's not helping you. And then, of course, you can get into a place where, like the folks at Sun got, where they're proprietary Solaris kinds of thing, declining market, or our friends at Kodak got. That's film, right? A Kodak moment at the end of the thing, right? So you're looking at that thing, and it doesn't take a genius to say, I want to be here. I want to have businesses in B. And by the way, but most of my businesses most of the time are in C. And by the way, I should be very careful about D. Interestingly, D is more tempting than it looks. It's a little bit like grapes that make Sauterne. Like just about the time they're rotting, they're the best they can be, right? And then, not so good. But this is really the most profitable businesses on the planet can be in D, right? Because you've amortized all your R&D, the customers are locked in. You're basically just going to the Phoenician in sunny, in Phoenix or whatever once a year to play golf and pretty much collect your royalties. So you look at that and you think, I can't stay too long at the fair, because if I do stay too long at the fair, I won't be able to. There's a kind of a black hole metaphor here somewhere where there's an event horizon, and if you go over the event horizon, adios. So the game would be, okay, I see the game we're trying to play. It doesn't seem like I need a PhD here, right? Make money, C, try to get into B businesses, get out of D. Maybe I could sell my D businesses and buy my way into B. Well, how hard can this be, right? Okay, so why is it hard? And there's a bunch of models that we can talk a lot about the antibodies, we can talk about culture, we can talk about that stuff, but there's actually a much clearer framework, I think, that really nets out why this is a real challenge for smart people of goodwill. Because the first thought is, those people are dumb and we're not. And the answer is, neither of those are true. Okay. Right. So it's like, okay, no, we got to make this work. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is if you look at it's a horizon, investment horizon model. And it says, look, when you look at investing, there are 3 time horizons that matter in a corporation. The first time horizon is the current fiscal year. If you put in money in the first quarter and it comes out the fourth quarter, like if I give you 7 more salespeople and you make a new revenue target by the end of the year, that was the Horizon 1. You know what? Large companies love Horizon 1, and they're very good at it. So not the problem area, right? The problem area, we've always said, is innovation, right? And so we think Horizon 3, that's the problem area. Thank you for playing. No, it's not. It turns out large corporations have fabulous innovation. IBM Labs, Nokia Labs, HP Labs, PARC when it was Xerox PARC Labs. Fabulous innovation. More innovation there that's in all of the little, eco startup garage things that we're doing right. Tons of this stuff. And they do very well with it. The problem statement is when they try to bring that innovation to a material business. And that's where it flunks. And you say, well, why does that happen? Well, here's the deal. To run the Horizon 1 business, you've got a bunch of operating resources, and think particularly about your sales and marketing and service and your customer-facing stuff. In Horizon 3, you're making no demands on that infrastructure, none. In fact, the only thing you're doing is you're giving demos, which they love, because they can bring in their customers, show them some exotic demo, and then say, now, buy some more of my regular gear, right? Okay. So 3 and 1 actually like each other, and they have very little to compete with. And the corporation funds 3 out of a kind of an R&D budget, which I could have never gotten my hands on anyway, right? So it's kind of like CapEx versus OpEx kind of thing. And so we're fine. When I try to take that business and bring it to material size, I bring it into Horizon 2 and I say, look, I need some of those Horizon 1 resources. I need salespeople, I need marketing, I need services. But by the way, it doesn't pay off in this year, okay? And the guy goes, you know, man, if my comp program wasn't like it is, I could be more sympathetic to you, but go away, right? Or worse, the people say, no, we fund this stuff. No, we all fund it together. Okay, I'll take care of them. Mm-hmm. Yep. So you get taken care of on Tuesday of next month. And the problem when you're a Horizon 2 business is it's all about fast latency, you know, all this pivot stuff that we're reading about, Eric Ries, lean startup, you know, C blank, 4 steps to an epiphany. It's all about you got to do it now. You got to be really responsive. You make your adjustments. You can't wait till Tuesday. You can't wait till 2 o'clock, right? It's got to be happening now, and you can't get the resources. You can't get the right sales resource. You can't get the right marketing resource. Sometimes we have an overlay sales force for a while, and it actually works pretty good. And then just about the time you get to real scale, they go, oop, that's too expensive, and they pull it out. And they pull it out somewhere between 1 and 2 to 3 years too early. Because all the numbers look wrong. All your operating ratios look wrong. And that's the big problem. The big problem is, you know, Horizon 1 is kind of like the adult business, and Horizon 3 is like a grandchild, or like a little baby. You love, it could be Mozart. It could be Michael Jordan. It could be both. You know, maybe the piano at night, basketball during the day. It could be anything, right? Horizon 2 looks like about a sullen 16-year-old teenager with spots, right? You know, they want the car, they want the family car, right? They make no money, and they like 7 tacos at a time, right? So it's like, what? No. Okay, so the part of the category power is to realize this is a very, very tough ask for the corporation. Now, let me tell you, and so as a result, of course, what people go is, wow, I don't know if I can ever get anything through Horizon 2. I'll put 3 or 4 or 5 horses in the race, and God, maybe from some miracle one will get through. Well, miracles don't happen very often in large companies. And so it's interesting to see, in this last decade, we've seen a black swan performance from Apple, right? Apple brought on 3 brand new franchises in 1 decade. 3. iPod, music franchise. iPhone, cellular franchise. iPad, media tablet franchise. I mean, honest to God, real huge. That's why it's worth $500 billion, or that's why at least people value it today at $500 billion. They got 3 things through Horizon 2 in 1 decade. That is the world record, never before equaled performance. Okay? In that time, HP got none. Dell got none. IBM got none. Microsoft, maybe you'd give them SharePoint or Xbox. Okay? They don't look as valuable as that. Cisco, maybe you give them telepresence. Who the hell got anything else through in the last 20 years? So it's a big, big deal to get even 1 through. So one of the rules we're having here is 1 at a time, single file. And by the way, that was Steve's rule. Steve did not start the iPhone until the iPod was completely through and well established. And he didn't start the iPad until the iPhone had gotten all the way through. He delayed the iPad. Okay? So we just have to rethink this problem differently. And the only other thing I'll share with you, because there's a bunch of stuff in the book, but I'll just do one last thing, is when you measure performance, and this is what Horizon 1 is so good at, you've got to measure for the right things. And the problem we've had is we had 2 sets of metrics. We had this set of metrics, which we call the OpEx stack, and everybody in this room who's ever worked in a large corporation knows exactly what that's all about. And they're fabulous performance metrics for Horizon 1. We also had a set of much more qualitative metrics for what we would call the CapEx stack, right? And you know, we kind of knew that when we saw a good, exciting project or a wonderful technology, or you got these awards or people get really excited, that was great. And these two, board of directors acknowledge both of these things, but we never had a good set in the middle. So what would happen in the middle is we'd start with the metrics on the right, and then when they started asking for those Horizon 2 resources, the first year we'd say, yes, we have to invest. Good, right? So we do, and we go one more year, it's like, okay, I need more. More? Yeah, I only had 6 tacos. I need 8 tacos, right? I need more. And the next year it's like, well, I don't, and then at the end of that one they say, yeah, we need more. And it's like, what? You're eating me out of house and home. We can't do this. And so they immediately put them on the OpEx program, in which case they look horrible, and then you kill them. And you kill them because you say, look, you guys don't know how to manage. You guys don't know how to run your business. So what we realized is we needed a set of metrics for the Horizon 2 challenge. And we took them from Crossing the Chasm. These are the same metrics that we use for Crossing the Chasm. And it says, basically the problem statement is, how would you scale a business from $10 million to $100 million inside a $10 billion company? And the answer is, particularly with a B2B type of business, you say, I'm going to focus on a segment, I'm going to win the top accounts in that segment, it's going to get it to a tipping point. When I get it to the tipping point, I will win this stuff. It's all, if you've never heard that story, Crossing the Chasm tells the story. And the critical ingredient isn't your capital budget or your OpEx budget, it's your Timex budget. This is a Timex problem. You have to do this in 6 to 8 quarters. 10 to 160, what are you talking about? Well, if you have the resources of a large corporation truly behind a single Horizon 1 effort, two effort, from the CEO through the sales, through the marketing, through the services, all the way down, we're doing one. It's like getting onto the freeway at metering traffic time. We get one car on the freeway at a time, but by God, the entire company is devoted to doing that. You can go from 10 to 100 million in 2 years. I mean, you could just by brute force, you can do it. We don't do that. We put 6 or 8 or 10 horses in the race, and we guarantee none of them get even close to that kind of performance. But we could. We could. And this thing says we should. Okay. So that's where the dialogue around category power does. It's particularly important in industries that are being disrupted, marketing and advertising right now, digital media right now, not oil and gas, right? Oil and gas, pretty much the next 10 years, probably pretty much the last 10 years times 1 or 2, whatever, okay? All right, so that's category power. And those are some of the frameworks. And what I'm trying to share with you is the way you have a conversation around power, you don't bring in a guru to tell you about the future. You bring in frameworks and you try to work with them as a team to figure out, does this cast light on the struggles that we're having? And if so, could we act better by responding to the framework in some new way? Company power happens when people bring you business because you're the top dog. They curry favor with you. They actually don't bring it to your competitor, they bring it to you because you are the one, kind of the market maker in their world. And it gives you enormous, and you get that power through competitive advantage. So when you want to being number one, this is Jack Welch always said, be number 1, number 2, or don't play. He's playing for company power. And the company power game is a very simple game. It says, look, in any category, there's you and a bunch of competitors, and most of the time you guys are somewhat interchangeable, and therefore the world bargains with you, and your customers bargain with you, and your suppliers bargain with you, and everybody bargains with you, and you kind of, it's called life, right? Now, if you said, I wanted to change my power, what that would involve is resetting the bar outside the norms of the category in a way that other people cannot follow. Okay? And again, our friend, Mr. Jobs did it 3 times in 1 decade, spectacularly. And when I say cannot follow, it's going to take a long time. The iPod iTunes franchise, yeah, I think Amazon's going to go after it. I think Walmart's going to go after it. I think it's going to take a long time. And the iPhone thing, maybe faster. The Google Android ecosystem, we'll see. But man, feels pretty strong. And the iPad, I don't think the playbook from RIM was exactly the iPad killer. And nor, frankly, is the Kindle Fire, right, which is a much better product. But anyway, what you're doing is you're creating unmatchable capability, and you're leveraging your crown jewels. And that's pretty interesting, by the way, in terms of being where we are now at PARC, because PARC's kind of a jewel discovery jeweler. You guys play with jewels. And I think you can be catalytic for a bunch of larger clients who are in these yellow circles to say, guys, you may have a path out of your yellow circle that you're not seeing, Now, you'll need to do some of the other issues that we were talking about before, but at least let's do this. Now, the challenge here is this is a hugely asymmetrical bet, meaning you don't, this is the opposite of Brad Garlinghouse's peanut butter manifesto memo. Remember, like 2008, he just kind of took the Yahoo folks to the woodshed. He was a member of them. And he said, you know, we take all our R&D budget, and we kind of peanut butter it across all of Yahoo. And as a result, kind of nothing happens, right? This is the opposite. This is like, no, we're going to put it all into one thing, and we're going to go in that direction. And as a result, we're going to kind of starve a whole bunch of things. So this is socially unpopular, right? But you can do it. The book Dealing with Darwin is about how you would go about doing that. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but I do want to make one point about this before we go on. And large companies often make a mistake here. They think that they can do this in terms of whatever's the hot thing in their world, and they need to understand that at any given time, you have to know which of these two power positions your company can occupy, and the answer is only one. I don't care if you're a $100 billion company, the answer is one. And that's I got to tell you, that's not a very popular statement, just in case you wanted to know. But the idea behind this is, look, there are two ways in which people have scaled to really magnificent power. One is with a kind of a B2B complex systems model, enterprise customers, governments as customers. I've got hundreds, maybe thousands of customers, but they pay me millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? And the other one is, no, I have millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of customers, and they pay me $8 a month, right? And both of those models we've watched succeed over and over and over and over again. And so inevitably, as you get to be a large company and you're kind of running out of room in whichever one of these models you're in, the grass starts to look very green on the other side of the model fence, right? And so the thing you need to understand, and then periodically you have to go and take yourself to the woodshed, and you end up, you know, splitting up Motorola handsets from Motorola Networks, selling off the printer division to Lexmark and the PC division to Lenovo, shutting down Flip Video, because you know what? You just can't do it. And the reason you can't do it is this is as different as chalk and cheese. Even though you can say that this is an engineering discipline, those two people they barely speak the same language, right? Systems architecture and product design, you know, when you go into the field and you're trying to talk about how do we interact with customers, end-to-end integration, which is a lot about business process and systems process versus user experience. You ever had a user experience from an IT department? No. You know, proprietary technology advantage versus price point. Having to hit a price point, by the way, by August so that it can be in the channel by September because it's for Christmas. It's a totally different discipline, right? Domain expertise versus brand image. The only thing funnier than listening to a complex systems company talk about branding is to listen to a volume ops company talk about domain expertise, right? Because neither of them know what they're talking about at all, right? So project management versus ease of support, ecosystem relationships versus viral appeal. Both of those are hugely interesting ideas, but they're totally unrelated to each other. And so if you're going to get escape velocity, if you're really going to get yourself outside the yellow circle, the odds that you would do this on both sides of this are infinitesimally small. You have to figure out, we have this concept called the stronger hand. If you're a large company, you have businesses in both of these areas. At least you have significant operations in both of these areas, right? You might have complex sales and you might have high volume manufacturing, for example, a very common thing. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out which business model hand do I get them with the left hook or the right cross, right? And the answer is you got to pick one. You got to pick one. And if you don't, if you go back and forth, you will guarantee that you will not achieve an escape velocity outcome. And a lot of opportunity is wasted by missing that. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit faster because I want to kind of get to the Q&A piece of this stuff. Market power, the key idea behind that is, in this group of customers, we became the chosen one. We became the one that became the trusted advisor, the market segment leader, the one that the people believe in. And it has two versions of this story. The version for the complex systems model was taught in Crossing the Chasm and Inside the Tornado. And it just said, look, if you think of a target segment as a customer with a compelling reason to buy and a whole product that fulfills the compelling reason to buy for the target customer, the way you win a segment in a complex model is you just totally overperform for that problem and that customer by bringing a whole product which is just so complete and so perfectly tailored to that problem, it's game over. Because all your other competitors think, well, that's one of 1,000 problems. Give them that problem, we'll work on the other 999. Once you knock over one pin, then the whole idea is you can take those relationships with customers and sell them other things, and you can take this solution set and the partner set and sell them to other people, okay? So the opportunity to go in both directions, and that's how you scale market power. It's very, very hard for large corporations to do this because one of those bowling pins is probably $50 million. And you're saying, I'm sorry, I'm a $30 billion corporation? $50 million is a rounding error, right? So how in the world can we focus at that level? And the deal is because that's how you grow things organically. Okay? Now, at some point, one of the challenges of being a large corporation is at some point the law of large numbers says you can't get there from here organically. You're going to have to use acquisition. And I'm completely in support of that conclusion with one caveat. You've got to do it organically first. If you don't build the organic innovation team and get to the first 100 million by yourself, when you go to do the acquisition, you have nothing to plug it into in the home thing, and you'll get organ rejection. And the new team won't really know how to do business in your world. And by the way, you've paid them so much money, they don't want to do business anymore. They want to have an island in the Caribbean, right? So as a result, you got to do the first 100 million is on you. And then the next 900 million is on the acquisition. And you can plug it in, that kind of play. Now, that was great for Crossing the Chasm Inside the Tornado, but in the last 10 years, I kept on getting these emails from people in college going, this doesn't really sound like Google or Facebook or MySpace or YouTube. So you're kind of irrelevant, aren't you? My professor's actually making mistakes assigning this book. This chasm thing is pretty old-fashioned. And so we started saying, well, how in the world would we work in that world? Because what we realized painfully, obviously, after about 3 or 4 or 5 years of this is, it's a complex systems model, stupid. It's not a volume ops model. So then what was the volume ops model? I just want to share with you where we're going. This is a whole bunch of new work we're doing we're very excited about. But this is the idea this is the framework we would say, if you're going to start a volume ops business, this is what you need to think about. The first thing you need to think about is, how am I going to get acquisition, right? Eyeballs, whatever it is. Then the next piece is, how do I get engagement? Okay, so I get people to engage with my product or my service or my site or my medium, whatever it is, my game, whatever it is. Then how do I monetize, right? And then how do I enlist? And you think, well, enlist, what about, I thought engage, enlist, engage? Well, engage is people getting involved with it. Enlist is kind of like what they do in terms of how they act with other people in the world about you. So if you get these really high net promoter scores, that means that somebody in your customer base is actually helping you acquire the next customer. They're going and getting them for you. It's virality. By the way, if you have the opposite experience, if you're a cable television company, for example, you probably know a word called churn. That's because we are unenlisted with you, right? And then retention is sort of the one in the middle. So the idea behind this model was, what you do as an entrepreneur is you're a starter motor. And you start doing experiments. You do some experiments around acquisition. You do some experiments around engagement, monetization, enlistment. You're just trying, how does it work? How does it work? You're trying to get the gears to start to interact with each other. You're trying to get this thing called network effects. I'm trying to get these things going. They're kind of chug, 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 just like starting a lawnmower. But if I can get it going, I can get this thing called a tornado. Okay? And the premise of the model is, at any given time, one of the 4 gears is slower than the other 3, and that's the gear you got to speed up. Okay? And so having the conversation with your colleagues about what's the right gear and where should I be investing this quarter is a pretty interesting conversation to have. And what you discover is 2 of the gears are performance gears, acquisition and monetization. You can get anybody in the board or any investor to focus on those 2 gears. Interestingly, the gears that are I would argue the more strategic gears are your power gears, which are engagement and enlistment. And all this stuff that's interesting, we were talking about social consciousness, and we were talking about user experience, and all these kinds of things that are going on here at PARC. It's because we have a lot of performance attention on acquisition and monetization, and you can get ComScore metrics, and you can get all kinds of metrics on those two. Very hard to get precision and accuracy around enlistment and engagement, but it's kind of the winning game. Okay, 2 more and we're out. So offer power, pretty much what you would say. These are offers that are just, people say, I want that one. When you bought your kid a smartphone and you said, you know what, or maybe let's go back to a music device, this other one is just as good as an iPod. I'll give it to him for Christmas. And then you got it on the 26th, right? Because it wasn't just as good as an iPod. The competitors could not copy the effort. So the issue here is, and I just want to give you one framework for this. We make a big mistake about offer power all the time, because there's actually we talk about innovation in a way that actually misleads us. So what the work on innovation says is there are 3 ways you make money from innovation, and the one that is most obvious and the one that everybody gets excited about is differentiation. And that's great, because that's exactly what you think it is. It is the iPod, it is the iPhone, blah, blah, blah. But the richest software company in the world never did that, ever. And that was Microsoft. Microsoft never differentiated, except arguably on the integration of Windows and the integration of Office. But that was their form of innovation. But they neutralized like maniacs, right? So Lotus would invent the spreadsheet. WordPerfect would do the word processor. Ashton Tate would do the database. Novell would do the local area network. Netscape would do the browser. Microsoft owns them all of them, okay? Because they could neutralize with an aggression that we had never seen before, okay? So neutralization innovation turns out to be very, very important. And by the way, the bigger you are, the more your customer base wants you to neutralize rather than differentiate. It's like, please, the way the world feels about big companies is, oh God, we're married. Not particularly happily, but we're married. I just need you to kind of keep up, I don't need you to be like, no, just keep up, okay? So neutralization, and the danger is, what if you fall behind? Well, I'll tell you the danger of falling behind. It's spelled Nokia. The world's largest phone company, so is teetering on the brink of going over this event horizon. Now, they're certainly taking another big shot at it. Stephen Elop came from Microsoft. They're going to use Windows 8. We'll see where that thing goes. And Windows 8, by the way, is a very cool product, so we'll see where it goes. But how did they get there? And the deal was, Elop wrote a memo, I guess it was February of last year. He said, how is it possible that Apple in 2007 came out with the iPhone, and in February of 2011, Nokia has no product remotely resembling it? Which was true, by the way. And the true answer, which I don't think anybody ever said, was we were too proud. We were too proud. We felt we had to leapfrog. We could not accept that we would copy somebody like that. So neutralization turns out to be really important. And then optimization is, and by the way, we have to pay for this stuff. So every place else, and by the way, optimization is a form of innovation, and if you don't think so, try it sometime, okay, and see how it works. Now, interestingly, when you do this, there are 2 ways to lose money, one of which is called failing. Okay? But failing is the price of poker in the innovation game. If you don't ever fail, you are not taking enough risk. If you fail kind of continually, maybe God is giving you a message, right? So, okay, maybe you're not supposed to do this job, okay. But failure is part of the point. The thing that's horrible is waste, and I think this area is not drawn to scale. I think this area is probably 90% of most pie charts, and I'm serious about the phrase 90%. Why? Because here's where it comes from. It comes from differentiation projects that don't actually ever get outside the yellow circle. That would describe many. I've often done this exercise with a large audience. Picture an Oldsmobile. Can't. Nope, not there. Now, do you think Oldsmobile had an R&D budget? You bet they had an R&D budget. Every single year, they had a huge R&D budget. They spent gazillions of money on design, and nothing, whiffed the entire thing, right? So that's the thing about differentiation. And what happens with differentiation projects is we start out with something really strange, but then it gets to the first phase review, right? At the first phase review, that's very strange. It's exciting, but maybe you could, just pull your horns in a little bit. And then you get to the second and the third gate review, and by the fourth gate review, it looks like every other project you've ever done in your entire life, right? So as a result, it's very easy to spend money on differentiation and never get there. The second one, and this is where Yahoo got into such huge trouble. Neutralization projects that go too far and don't go fast enough. The game of neutralize is get something close out immediately and then iterate. Microsoft taught us how to do it. If you just would read the Microsoft playbook, you're done. Netscape Navigator came out, it was going to make Windows obsolete, right? Microsoft came out with Internet Explorer 1.0. It was pathetic. It was possibly the worst product that ever, I don't know, it was horrible, right? It was a joke. Netscape Navigator, meanwhile, came out with 2.0. Ha ha! Microsoft came out with 2.0. Thank you for playing. Netscape Navigator came out with 3.0. Microsoft Internet Explorer came out with 3.0, and you thought, this is better. This is better. So neutralization, that's really great. But you have to do it fast. See, Nokia 4 years. You can't wait. You got to do it now, and you can't spend more than you need to. In other words, you're not trying to leapfrog. You're just trying to get back in the game. Okay? Yahoo, when Google got ahead of them in search, they kind of went ballistic. They felt like they had to, leapfrog Google. And it was like, man, nah, bad idea. But they didn't neutralize. And then the third one is optimization, things that don't actually do it. This model turns out to be a great, if you're on a project team or a program team, just take this model out and sit down with the team. And here's the kicker. Anything we're doing in this thing should have one and only one innovation objective. I'm going to claim that differentiation, neutralization, and optimization are mutually exclusive. And that any time that you blur the two together, you're dumbing something down and you're slowing something down. Right? So don't do it. Now, at some point, you have to do all three. So there's got to be, at some level, there's got to be an orchestration. But don't ask a person to be differentiating on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and neutralizing on Tuesday and Thursday. Okay? Which is what we do all the time. Because we have these release trains. And they have their differentiation features, and they have their neutralization features, and they have their optimization features. And we put them all into one train, which means that train is either going too slow or too fast. Right? And too far or not far enough. The last one close is this notion about execution power. So execution power sounds, isn't that performance? And why are we talking about power still? This is performance, isn't it? And I think for most of execution it is, except for one thing, which is this issue about tipping points. Because, and I brought it up earlier in the day, I'm just going to close with the same issue. If you look at any arc of execution, there's an invention phase at the beginning, there's a deployment phase in the middle, and there's an optimization phase once you kind of get to scale. And in that model, there's a transition to scale and a transition for yield. So this is the one of getting large enough, and this is the one to get optimized enough or efficient enough. And in both cases, there are tipping points. Okay? This is a tipping point which you typically solve through organically. That's a tipping point you typically solve through acquisition. But in both cases, it's a tipping point. And until you get to the tipping point, no other metric matters. No other execution metric matters. And we routinely talk about sales margin in the first 10 sales of a new business. Why? Who cares, right? And the answer is the CFO cares. Yeah, but the CFO is taking a Horizon 1 set of metrics and applying it to a Horizon 2 problem. Stop. Okay. So this whole notion of when you manage the tipping point, tipping point is a miracle. The day before you reach the tipping point, you're climbing uphill, and by the way, you are very, very tired. Okay? And the day after the tipping point, you're going downhill with the wind in your hair and a goofy grin on your face. Because all of a sudden, the world is calling you and pulling you forward. And it is, you see this over and over in startups, and it's hysterical. Because you've been calling on these guys, you've been seeing me, I'm fine. No, I love startups. Energy, yeah, it's energizing. Jeez, okay. And then you see them the next time, they're going to like, so it's like, oh my God, he's gone crazy. It's happened. But the truth is, the world has just all of a sudden capitulated, and they're pulling their way. And it's like, you're king of the world. You're Leonardo DiCaprio in the front of the Titanic, man. You're just going like a bat. Okay, so after the tipping point, the world assists, and therefore, the only manageable metric that matters prior to the tipping point is where are we relative to the tipping point. Unfortunately, there is no sign in the road. Tipping point here, right? But that's the game. And so you continually have to figure out, well, how would I guess where the tipping point is? How much? Because the problem is, if you quit the day before the tipping point, right, exactly. You go all the way back to zero. Go all the way back to start. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Right? Okay. So it's a very, very, very painful thing. And if you think about why people get depressed in large corporations, think about how many strategic initiatives are launched every year in every large corporation. Then we talked about the didn't get to the tipping point phenomenon. So think about how a person, because when you have a tipping point initiative, you put your heart and soul into it. And if you don't get there, it really is disappointing and depressing and demoralizing. And if you watch it happen over and over and over, you go, oh, I see. This is a sucker's bet. Dilbert was right? I have a pointy-haired manager, right? And you don't really, the pointy-haired manager believes in it too, but we didn't get there. So that's why tipping points are so damn important, and you must not let anything get in the way of getting to the tipping point. So just to close again, the three things we talked about and the 30 things we go back in the book, and I'd love to take questions, and if your crap detector went off, I'd love to have you sort of share with that, because I can always, I still have time to sort of second edition. Put power before performance, and that issue of having the conversation around power, which means you have to put leadership before management. Not that it's better than management, but you have to do it before it in time, and it's the one that needs the first attention. And then this tipping points before ROI or ROR. So that's the idea. I thought we'd throw it open for some discussion and Q&A, and then see where it goes. So thank you very much. Enjoyed. Hold on, they have microphones because we're streaming. The gentleman right there raised his hand.
Yeah, Geoffrey, my question has two parts. One is that you mentioned about sort of put all the wood behind one arrow when you release the next innovation. But since you're talking about sort of an investment theme, and the investment, you talk about diversification and portfolio, right? So when you put everything, all the eggs in one basket, or one egg for everything,
got it.
What if it fails spectacularly,
right?
Then the CEO is going to be on the hook and he's out.
Right. Okay.
So psychologically, that's a problem.
Good.
Secondly, and the second part is, if you look at GE's model, right? GE is not releasing just one. They have a diversified organization.
Yep.
So they basically say, well, you can run this, but in a certain time frame, if you're not number one or number two, then you're out.
Yep. Okay. So both of those are really good points. Let's take the first one. So how in the world can you not diversify? You have to diversify. So first of all, you do have to diversify. So at any given point, if you only had one Horizon 2 candidate, that would be an unacceptable state. But what I am saying is you have to put them in single file. So we say, okay, I only want one in the chute at a time, just the way you get on a crowded freeway at rush hour, one car at a time. And the answer why? Because when we try more than one car at a time, we never, ever, ever get a car on the freeway sustainably. And I mean, like, our track record is so awful, it's an embarrassment. So therefore, have a portfolio, but sequence it, and then when you put the one on, the next thing is, by the way, we used to say, well, that one, it's Lawrence's job, right? Lawrence, we're right behind you, right? Right behind you. Okay, and the deal's got to be, you know what? It's not Lawrence's job. It's Lawrence's job. It's the head of sales job. It's the head of development's job. It's the CEO's job. It's the CFO's job. It's the board's job. God damn it! If we don't get this thing on the freeway, we all lost. So we got to play it that way. So okay, let me. That was number one, and then I'm actually going to move it to. I'll have a follow-up question out there, but not here. And then the second piece of that was, what was the second piece? GE, okay, so the GE model is actually a pretty interesting model of essentially playing late B, C, early D. So in that game, what you say is, look, I'm not going to take A risk, or even I'm going to actually miss most of B, but I will take relatively mature businesses, but I will sell off my railroad business, which is now sort of reaching toward D, and I'll buy my NBC media business, which I'm hoping is going to be kind of more B-ish. And I will play a BCD management game where I never go through Horizon 2. I play the game at scale kind of from birth. And that works. That does work. Okay? Gentleman here.
Perhaps I'm asking this question. I haven't gotten around to reading your book yet. I promise to.
Well, thank you.
You used a connection I've never heard before, secular marketing. Maybe you explained that in the book, but that seems like two words you wouldn't think
Would
of.
put together. So it was secular growth. It's a term that the investment bankers sometimes use. Secular growth and cyclical growth. So secular growth is a one-time sort of movement of money from one place in the economy to another. So we all bought cars. We all bought TV sets. We all bought PCs. And so when in that first 5 to 10 years of the category, there are growth rates that are 30, 40, 50, sometimes at some points 100% growth, one time only. Once that's happened once, it never happens again. Then it goes into cyclical growth, which is, okay, double digit, maybe on great years, but normally single digit, and normally not negative, but kind of going through. And that's the difference. Secular, yeah, but investment bankers are strange people. Yeah. Oh, hold on a minute, just because we're streaming, let's get you the
Thanks. One thing I didn't really understand very well was the nature of pivot points in a large model. And from the way I saw a lot of your stuff, it's like taking, in essence, an entrepreneurial model, sticking it in the middle, and using a lot of the stuff that's there. But the thing that winds up being very unnerving to a lot of people, being an entrepreneur myself, is an absolute incredible change of direction right in the middle. Right. And my concern is that the more money you have in that point, you get more people you have to pivot, right. And it's like snap the whip in an ice skating rink.
That's a great question. So the pivot model, and particularly pivoting, it's rivaling chasm now for kind of the jargon of I think it's actually winning. But pivoting is 0 to 10 million. It's like a really critical verb. But as you point out, as you get mass, for those of you who have mass, it gets harder and harder to pivot if you ski, for example. So I think you're right. It gets harder and harder, and therefore I think you have to go from PT boat to destroyer to aircraft carrier, and you can't pivot at that. In Horizon 2, a pivot in Horizon 2 is a desperation move, and it normally doesn't work. Yeah. 2 over here.
In retirement, I've become something of a historian, and one of the things I'm interested in is how gurus of the past viewed the future. For example, in 1939-40, General Motors had a diorama showing automobiles going around controlled freeways in an urban environment. Last week, reading the new Intel initiative, it dawned on me that looking at that and looking at my wife's new Hyundai, all of the technology we need
is there.
Yep. But does anybody recognize it? Now, if I relate that to what Apple's done in the last few years, and I'd suggest you throw iTunes in there to make it 4.
Sure.
He recognized that although all of these technologies in one form or another were there, his vision was totally different. So if you take the vision thing, how do you work that into your model?
Well, I think the vision thing is, there's actually a lot of vision, I think, particularly in this valley. I think we're long on that. We sometimes, when we have these visions of the future, forget to look at the calendar and see what year it is. So we're often wrong on our timing. But I think the key thing that Steve was able to do, and I think founder CEOs are able to do this much more likely than hired CEOs. So Larry Ellison, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, those guys, because they can kind of look and say, you know what, my way or the highway, the hell with it, I think this is the right thing to do, we're going to do it. That's much harder for a hired CEO to do who's supposed to deliver shareholder value to the board, and he genuflected to the Wall Street and did all that stuff. So I think that's harder to do, but I think that the triumph there was Steve had a vision, but he also had this unbelievable way to motivate and lead Apple. So it was I would give more credit to that than just the vision itself. This gentleman here had one right. Let's just pass it back over. And then somebody the back of the room's got to come in. You can't do this back of the class stuff. I used to teach freshman English. I know you people.
So one of your slides said you can sell something complex or sell something in volume. And it just occurred to me, thinking of Salesforce.com and other software as a service companies where that model seems to blur to me, and I'd love to
it's
hear
great.
you speak
No,
to
it's
that.
Terrific. In fact, when I put that model up, Mark had me come and talk to the Salesforce team in '96 or whenever it was. It was sometime fairly early on. It might have been a little bit later than that. It was a little bit because I didn't have that model then. But whatever it was. And I said, you guys are starting in the middle. SaaS actually has the ability to penetrate and go in either direction, but you're going to have to pick. And Mark said, no, we're going to go both ways. But that, if you know Mark, that was an obvious answer, right? But he hasn't. What he did was he went into the middle. He could have gone to volume, but he didn't. He went to complex systems. And I think partially because Siebel just created such a huge price umbrella for him to go eviscerate, and Oracle and Siebel together and SAP and all that stuff. So if you look at his balance sheet and his income statement right now, it all comes from the complex systems side of the house. Okay? And Merrill Lynch was the defining deal. That was his first 10,000 seat deal, and that kind of. And of course, he grew up, you know, as Larry's protege, so he had the complex systems genome. Yeah. Someone else. Or okay, over here. Okay, and then maybe then one here. Maybe that'll be it. We'll just maybe take. Is that about right? Okay, last two. Okay, yeah.
Okay, two questions. When you opened about the financial Wall Street not supporting the way corporations work, do you think if we flipped it over from a capital appreciation play back to what it used to be, a dividend play, we could fix some of that?
Okay, that's a great. I think actually that's a very. I think there's been too much capital accumulation in tech for sure. We're watching Apple start to give some back. We've watched Microsoft start to give some back. Yes, I do. I think if we had more of a dividend economy, and I think actually we're going to realize, most financial professionals will tell you in the last 10 years, dividends was by far a better set of returns than equity. And so yes, I think that's a very good idea.
Okay, and your Horizon 2 model, my experience has been that the big problem is that doesn't work for truly disruptive technologies because big companies can't do it because they can't sell things that are actually disruptive.
So the way in which you would play that, I'll push back a little bit there. I don't think that the Horizon 1 sales force can sell the disruption. I agree with that. So the first thing you got to do is say, okay, I need an overlay sales force for the Horizon, even in Horizon 3, but certainly in Horizon 2. And then the issue is you can't let the Horizon 1 sales force block and say, well, you can't come into my account. I've got a big deal going on. You can't do that. So you got to kind of, that's why you have to have the CEO and the head of sales and everybody. I mean, literally, there's got to be kind of an icebreaker going out in front of this thing. But you can get a fit-for-purpose sales force or recruit a fit-for-purpose sales force to get from 10 to 100 million. I think you can do that. And then I do think you do an acquisition which has its own institutional sales force. And when that comes in, if you've crossed the tipping point, everybody kind of welcomes the new troops. And I've watched Cisco acquire Tandberg, and they'd done enough of their own innovation that worked. But if you haven't, it doesn't work. Last question. I can't remember who had their hand up, or whoever it is. You guys, somebody make the call. This gentleman right here. Okay, all right. Oh, the other gentleman even pointed at him. That was a double vote. Okay. You better have a good question, or your friend will be mad at you.
I'll try to ask his question. So I'm in violent agreement with your point about what I call the tyranny of the quantifiable.
The quantifiable, yeah.
Yeah, that we tend to measure what's easy to measure as opposed to what's appropriate to measure. But the last question really gets at my primary question, which is, what's the value of a corporation to society? And there's been a lot of political discussion lately about U.S. versus international corporations. And the analogy I like to use is that if I do something, especially when I had a military commission, counter to the interests of the U.S. Constitution, I could be tried for treason. On the other hand, our corporate citizens, in fact, are by law restricted to do that which is in the financial fiduciary interest of their owners, who are not necessarily the same as the country they are, quote, residents
They may be citizens of another country.
Do we need a new model?
Right. So I think that the deal there has got to be, we have to rebalance the model. I think the model is fine. It works. But the point is the other stakeholders have to reassert their place at the table. What has happened in the bubble, particularly the tech bubble, but then it happened again with the financial bubble, both cases, we just overweighted so dramatically to the investors. So literally, as a board member, if you're a board member in a public Delaware-owned corporation, the shareholders, you are responsible to the shareholders and frankly, nobody else. And that cannot be the right answer. It's horrible for society. So the purpose of a corporation is to create engines of employment. It is to create tax bases for the community, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we can play with policy a little bit just to start to rejoin the balance. But I actually think we just need to socialize and just stand up and say, you know what? This has gone too far. This is just, this is Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I mean, we got to take it to a new place, and I think that's going to be a moral stance before it's anything else. Well, listen, I think there's a refreshments outside.
Yes, there are.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jeff.